I'm here today with Florian Kiziak from L-Ring, and we're discussing sealants, both RTV and anaerobic. So the tip, what are the different ways a technician can cut these to achieve the proper bead of sealant?
There's a lot of possibilities, by the way. So in the end, you can decide by how big you're cutting the nozzle and in what kind of shape you're cutting the nozzle, how big will be your line, what you can put on the part. And this decides more or less like how good is the sealing job done.
So we did this experiment where we did 3 different lines with 3 different types of nozzles. Walk through the 3 different types that we're seeing here.
So yeah, of course, because oftentimes a technician thinks as much as is more or less helpful for more or less to do a proper sealing job, but nowadays it is like less is more. Because why I tell you less is more? You underestimate how it's spread out the material, and if it's spread out too far because you apply too much, then you're going to a high risk that some oil channels or something inside in the engine will getting blocked, and this is something what you really should avoid of it.
So in terms of the application, so you have the nozzle that determines the width, and then you have like this special key that's included with the package.
Exactly. This helps you, this special key, by the way, helps you to keep the right pressure inside in the tube to get out a good line, because otherwise you can have to squeeze in different kind of positions the tube and then maybe destroying the tube and makes a big mess. To avoid this, we have the squeezing key inside.
And you had this great tip you just showed me in regards to keeping the tube itself from not oxidizing and becoming hard with the cap itself.
Yeah, the cap itself is like a nice idea to store for the next application time the tube somewhere next to your workbench, because then you can reopen in an easy way, pull it out, the cured RTV, and then go ahead.
So here we have an example of an application of RTV or the Durco HT. Show me and walk me through the different nozzles and what these different beads would be used for, and also the application. This is kind of neat right here. We put it between glass.
Exactly, yes, because to more or less like show you, demonstrate you how they react if you're squeezing down the opposite side, if you're closing the sealing gap. But coming to the first side is really cutting the nozzle with a small hole in the front, straight down. There's a nice skill, you can really squeeze it out a little, because the squeezing key helps us to get the material in a good way out, and then we can lay the line on the surface. That's quite one of the things. The second line is like cutting this kind of nozzle in a V shape, and the V shape is more or less like also a nice possibility, because you can keep the contact to the surface and go in a straight movement forward to apply it in the defined level on top of the line. And the third one, of course, as we can see, that's quite a little bit too much. This is what more or less like a lot of guys doing outside there. They think, okay, as much as possible. Of course, it's doing a good sealing job, but you are going with a high risk that everything what is going to the outside, the same amount is also going to the inside. And this is more or less like the critical point of all of this, yeah.
So we did this really neat experiment with those 3 nozzles you've just cut to show what happens when you use the right amount or way too much.
That's correct. So all of them makes a proper sealing functionality to your surface, of course, but it is also depending about the right amount what you use. So we have the first line is a straight cut to the nozzle, so it means the hole was more or less like a small one. We just laid this on the top on our surface and it is in a decent way. The second one is more or less like cutting in a V shape. As we see, it looks like identical like here, but if we compare now the lines, the straight line, it's double up, like 3 to 4 times more wider, but also makes a good sealing job. The other one is also double up in size and is quite enough, a decent amount to make the right way to seal your surfaces to each other. And the third one, this is like what more or less like workshops doing a lot of times. They think, okay, I apply more, and they're right, of course, because it helps more. It's doing the same job as also the other two, but you're going for a high risk that something is going inside, is squeezing inside into your engine, and maybe it could be separating, then it could clog any kind of oil channels and leading in the end to an engine defect.
We just did this, but how long should it take for this to cure?
That's a good question. So the curing time starts immediately because an RTV is a room temperature vulcanization product. So it means as soon as it comes in contact with the air, it starts the reaction. So the reactions means like we are curing from the outside to the inside. So that means like you have a curing time approximately 5 to 15 minutes depending upon the temperature and humidity. If it's a little bit warmer, like summertime, it goes faster. If we have winter time, it takes a little longer, of course. But back to your question, if you apply this, for example, to an oil pan and you close your oil pan back to your engine block and you have to wait roughly like 30 minutes until you fill in the oil and start the engine, and you can leave more or less like the workshop out of it. Completely cured, it's after 24 hours. This is more or less like what we expect. But this is also depending about the sealing gap, and the maximum sealing gap is 2 millimeters.
So with a technician, let's say they're taking off a front cover on an engine, they're looking at what RTV or sealant was there. What's the difference in colors, and what should a technician abide by? Is it the service information or a recommendation from someone like Ellering?
That's good, because I can speak about our products. We have a gray and a black one, and the difference is mainly only the color. So the RTV is like the same, so it doesn't matter which color you prefer, and this is even like how the workshops prefer colors. That's the only reason why we have different colors, because the one likes to have more like a gray one and the other one more like a black one. So we can offer these two colors, but you can choose whatever you like. All the specs are like the same. They have a high temperature resistance up to 600 Fahrenheit. So that means also really, really high temperature resistance. Doesn't matter if gray or black. So in the end, it's really the choice of the mechanic.
Another question, let's say there is a gasket involved. Is there any situation where a technician should use both a sealant and a gasket?
It's a good question. It's a typical mistake that guys think if you have, for example, elastomer gasket, rubber gasket, valve cover gasket, something like this, they want to apply it. But it's completely not recommended to apply to any kind of gasket, any kind of RTV. The only spots where it must apply, it's like if you have some half moons, like for the camshafts on top, there on the edges there's necessary to do one drop. This is but only one drop, but not covering up the whole elastomer gasket with the kind of RTV. And even like if we speak about paper gasket, because a common thing is also to covering up a paper gasket with RTV, this is not recommended because you have to decide what should doing the sealing job, the paper gasket or the RTV. So if you want to apply something, then keep out the paper gasket and use only the RTV, because that's the same job. So then it's senseless to use a paper gasket.
So an anaerobic sealant, what does it do, and where should a technician be using that in application?
Of course, anaerobic, at first you have to understand what does anaerobic means like. Because if you compare it with an RTV reacts with the air, and an anaerobic is working without the air. So as soon as we're excluding the air out of the sealing gap, it starts the reaction. And this is exactly the benefit for this product, because sometimes you have applications in a car, you don't want to have any kind of material inside in the engine who more or less like negative influence your engine parts inside. Like if you're speaking about a camshaft carrier, for example, if something is going inside and it's blocking your valves and or something like this, this is something what you should avoid. And in this case, it's better to use an anaerobic instead of an RTV. An RTV is doing also the same job, but you're going for a higher risk.
So with these, it cures in the lack of oxygen with these sealants.
Exactly.
So you have a great demonstration right here with these two pieces of metal that you use in anaerobic.
Exactly. So that's a good example how we can describe and also explain how this anaerobic works, because oftentimes if mechanics use this for the first time and they applied it and the next day they came back and see, oh, that's still liquid outside. This product doesn't work. So they get used to it from an RTV because immediately it's cured, and if they touch it, it's hot. But as you see, the parts are fixed together. Because this is exactly how it works. The product works only metal to metal surface. This is very important to know. Uncoated metal is really important. So if you have a coating on top, like as we have here it doesn't work. So it's only working to an uncoated surface, really metal to metal, doesn't matter if it's steel or aluminium. Both are quite matchable or handleable for this kind of product. And as long as it stays with the oxygen in contact, it's liquid. So it means like if we apply it on the surface and we don't close the sealing gap, it stays liquid. But as soon as we are closing the sealing gap, it starts the reaction. And this is what happens here. And then it's getting hard.
So this is why a lot more transmissions are using this type of sealant, because it won't clog up the valve body.
Exactly. That is a better recommendation, to do the sealing job with an anaerobic product instead of going for an RTV. And of course, nowadays modern engines, they have more or less like aluminum to aluminum camshaft carriers, and there it's recommended to use an anaerobic, also by the OE manual, to go with that kind of stuff.
So when I started, there were just 2 thread locker or anaerobic sealants, blue and red. This is amazing to see all these different colors. What's the function of this? Which one's the strongest?
Yeah, so you have to understand the anaerobic works like all the same as we spoke about with if you're excluding the air out of the sealing gap. But why do we have this kind of huge variations? Because in the beginning everything was starting like for surfaces like camshaft carriers, timing covers and so on. We had the classical green and the orange one. And the green one was related to GM Opel, because back in the days they used the green one, and the red one was really well known for Volkswagen, so the German brand. So that's the reason why we have these 2 colors, and this is more or less like for surfaces where you really have to apply it. But there's also a bigger need for some engine rebuilders. They also want to more or less like fix any kind of cylinder liners inside in engines, or even like a bearing on the shaft or a gear on the shaft, and they also want to glue it in. In this case, you need a more thinner product, what means like a higher viscosity with a higher gluing effect, and that is like the ELAD what we have. So this is really a very thin product which stays between the surfaces and makes a good adhesion to each other. And the green one is like a universal. This is a combination out of all the other 3, so you can also use this as a thread locker, or you can use this also for a surface. Classical universal product, let's say. And the last 2 products is like the blue and the green one. That's the classical thread lockers, what you put on a thread to lock your nut to a thread, or even inside into an inner thread. And the blue one is medium, and the green one is a strong one.
So let's do an interesting experiment here. You laid these out very nicely, and we see that they're spreading out, the more viscous ones. What would happen if we did this? Let's take a look. So this is the viscous coming off right now.
Exactly. So we have a high viscosity on these 3 products, what means like they should go very, very close to the surface, and if we push something underneath, then it stays in between. The other one is a stable product, let's say less viscosity, and this is like if you want to apply it directly in front of a timing cover or on top, it's not flowing down because it should stay there on the surface. But here, for sure, it's the adhesive function a little bit less, because here it's not necessary to have more adhesive function as on the other sides.
So if you go on the L-Ring website, which we'll show right now, coming up there, you have the Sealant Advisor. How can that help me to make the right choice between an anaerobic, an RTV, or other sealant product?
That's a good question. Thank you for that. So if you go to our Sealant Advisor on our webpage, you don't have to know what is an anaerobic, what is an RTV, because in 4 simple steps, they're giving you the answer. So you have to fill out what is the temperature, what is the service, what you're working about, what should be resistant against fuel, yes or no. That's a quite important question about that. And in the end, you get as a result a recommendation what is the right suitable part for your application.
And you're even taking into account the size of the gap, the type of material.
Exactly. So this is a quite important fact because we have to take care about the gap, we have to care about the material, and even about what is has to handle of fluids around. So this is also quite major point about it.
And also that website is linked in the description, and it's right up here on the screen right now. So we've gone through RTV, we've gone through anaerobics. In terms of the chemical compatibility on an engine, how much does that play into it in terms of, does it come in contact with gasoline, coolant, engine oil? What does a technician need to be aware of, mainly when they're selecting it, but also when they're removing that old gasket?
Exactly, the removal before you apply something new, that's very important, and there you have to take very care about the surface, because you don't want to destroy the surface before you apply something. And even like what kind of products you can use. For example, if you go for an RTV is the best way to remove it with a plastic scraper. Of course, you cannot destroy any kind of surfaces, especially aluminium. It's very sensitive. You can create easy some deep scratches which can lead to some major defects. This is something what you should avoid. And on the other side, you can use your classical stuff out of your workshop, a classical brake cleaner, because the brake cleaner helps you to make it more softer. And that means also on the opposite side, RTV is not resistant against fuel and alcohol, something like this. And that's the reason why you can use these kind of products for the removal of the surface and for the cleaning purpose in the beginning. Different stories about the anaerobic. The anaerobic is resistant against fuel, even like they behave like a resin. It's getting hard like a resin. That means in the end you have really to do a scratching job and also keep your eye on the surface that you don't destroy it with a deep scratch.
So in terms of a tip for technicians when they're out there, what's the one thing they should have in their mind when selecting a product like this?
They should have it in your mind, okay, what is more or less like DOE recommended to use. That's the first thing, because it's written down normally in any kind of manual. Okay, we recommend this and this product, and oftentimes it's an RTV or an anaerobic. So that means like you have to choose that one. And then of course you have to see, okay, what is your application side, what you gonna do. And this is like in the end for classical repair stuff, like you have to have one of the green or the orange products, like for surfaces like camshaft carriers if you want to apply it there, or even for timing covers. You need for sure also a thread locker, because thread locker makes sense to save your locks, even not only to locking your bolt inside in any kind of place, also to protect them from the outside environment like water and so on, to not creating rust. So it's also preventing that water can going inside and creating some rusty situation. Next time if you want to open up the bolt, it's a little bit difficult. So this is also one of the benefits. And of course, the RTV is universal. I think all of the guys knows where's the application, like oil pans and also sometimes timing covers. That's classical applications for that. That's a universal product, let's say.